Well, welcome back to the Real Life Finance Podcast. I am your host, Ben Joergens, and I'm excited about today's guest. We're doing something new here, and the world of NIL is such a, powerful and big topic this day that I am really honored to have Coach Carmen Maciariello with us today. And Coach, it is a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Yeah, it's great to be here and excited to dive into this ever-changing world of college athletics and big business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had this intro that I was going to prepare to but I think you tell it so much better than I would. So what I'd like to do is just start off by telling us, a little bit about you, your athletic background, and kind of your job today.
Well, my job today is, I'm always on a fact-finding mission trying to help, student athletes that I help, whether they're in a grassroots Nike program, whether they're in college, whether they're professionally playing the game we love in basketball overseas or in the NBA. So, I started out way back when as a fourth grader that was told I could never play basketball, and I was a great kid, but maybe try to play soccer. I went on to be a Division I basketball player, went on to be a Division I captain, played professionally in Europe. And now I was a former Division I head coach, had a good amount of success, had won as an assistant an NIT championship at George Washington, a Patriot League title at Boston U. Was able to be a head coach at Siena in upstate New York. Won 2 MAC regular season titles as a head coach. Dealt with COVID. And then, had one bad year when money got involved. And so that kind of led me down this path to make sure I was as educated as possible, to make sure what happened to me wouldn't happen to others. And, you learn and you move on and you're better for it.
That's awesome. The extent of my basketball career was about 6th through 8th grade. So it's very impressive of what you've done over the years. And you mentioned a lot of traveling. You've lived in a lot of areas. And looking back on the time when you were moving countries, relying on athletic paychecks, what were some of the biggest financial lessons that you learned during that time?
Yeah, well, obviously understanding, your cash flow, right, and disposable income. I was fortunate, growing up in upstate New York. My father was a longtime wealth management advisor. And, so we had invested money in the markets. We had, savings bonds and college funds. And so I always wanted to make sure that I had enough money where I could travel, but I was always just living off what I was making. I never had to touch my nest egg. I never had to dip into savings. I could still, when I needed to take, some losses in the market for tax purposes, I could. We can talk about that stuff all later. But for me, it was about understanding, hey, my body was my temple. I needed to be able to produce. I played in Italy for 4 seasons on and off. I had an Italian passport, which was awesome. Loved the food. But it really was about understanding that cash flow, knowing when I came home, my friends were going to want to go out and go to the racetrack in Saratoga and go on vacation. So being able to also make money so I could do some fun things and not have to worry about not having enough.
That's a good point. Maybe we'll get to some Italian when you're here in Evansville. So we got some good places, but probably not quite the same as Italy. So did you have a favorite dish when you were over there?
I learned how to make a homemade pizza in southern Italy. The town I was in was called Masafra. It was a pizza limone. So it was a white pizza, fresh mozzarella. You take it out, though, and you put iceberg lettuce, a little thinly sliced prosciutto, and then lemon juice.
Kidding.
Great summer pizza.
I love it. So given your thoughts on the way that you managed money during those times, how do the experiences shape the way that you coach athletes on money today?
Well, first, you have to have your priorities in check. It's not about seeing a dollar sign and thinking you're just automatically going to qualify and a coach or a program is going to say, hey, here's a couple $100,000, right? The process and your product of being a great basketball player has to come first, right? Your discipline, right? How you get up and how you eat and how you train, how you live. All that stuff matters because these programs want to invest in you. But if you're not disciplined enough, that investment may not make it, right? You may not come to fruition in that program. You may be a guy that's getting a 6-figure deal, but sit in the bench because you picked the wrong school or don't have that money left. And now you still have to pay taxes, right? So there's a lot of pitfalls, but at the end of the day, I think it's, understanding that each student athlete, each family is a little different, right? There's different needs. And so that's what it's about, is basically assessing those situations first.
So not only being disciplined with yourself in the athletic front, but applying that discipline to finances is very important, as you've seen.
Yeah, it's instrumental, and then also you have to surround yourself with the right people. Yeah. Now with, so much out there in social media, right? So many people see the success stories, and a young man makes, $2 million and it's for one season of play. That's not typical, right? So people think that's the norm, but it's also understanding there's a lot of bad actors. There's a lot of bad advice. You have to know where you're getting your information, the source of the information, making sure it's credible. And, that's what I really take pride in being able to help our student athletes and the young men and women that I, help, because, your word is your bond. So, I'm not looking to get paid off of it. I just want to make sure that we're helping these young people and giving back to the communities.
I think it's so important because I work with people of all ages, from preschool up to seniors and everywhere in between. And it is that thing that many people are not taught a lot, or at least previously not taught a lot in schools, about managing money. So it's getting better, but I think it's great to have people like yourself that can apply that to that young generation. And, so for those just new or maybe don't understand NIL in general, can you kind of explain it and how it's really transforming athletics today?
Yeah, so, it started as basically young men and women getting paid for their name, image, and likeness, right? Yeah. They use your photo, they put it on a billboard with your school and your number, and now you're going to be able to reap the benefits of being a really good player, and now a company sees value in that, and it's going to drive business for them.
Yeah.
So fast forward a little bit, and now it's more or less pay for play. Now, you've had, obviously, universities kind of step in, and now they're able to pay under the guise of revenue sharing. So when a college makes money, whether it's the gate at a football game or a big-time TV deal, those proceeds, now they're able to fund their athletics teams, right? So they have $20.5 million, and they can kind of break that down however they want, whether it's to football, men's basketball, women's basketball, volleyball. And at the end of the day, some of these programs that don't have football, they may be in better shape because they're going to have a little bit more to spend on their basketball programs.
Yeah. It is interesting when you say that $20.5 million per year through the revenue sharing. I think right now they're estimating NIL to be estimated about $2.75 billion this year, which is a lot, because I think it's a big increase from when it started. I think the rules were introduced around 2021, right after COVID, if I remember correctly. And it's a lot of money. So doing what you're doing, I think, is fantastic. So for our audience and our followers out there, what do you think that not only the athletes, but probably their parents as well, should understand about contracts and revenue sharing in the grand scheme of NIL?
Yeah, so, obviously now the national letter of intent, which used to bind athletes to colleges during the signing periods, right? There was one early, one late. That's really gone.
Yeah.
So find a home, find a place where you want to get an education, because an education is still key, right? Yeah. At the end of the day, that ball's going to stop bouncing. You're going to need to be able to find a job. You're going to need to be able to have a diploma. For some schools, that graduation day is that championship game, right? For other schools, hey, maybe a family needs money up front. Maybe they've just refinanced their home. Maybe there's other debt that they've incurred, maybe through having to go to a prep school. Every circumstance is different. But I think the biggest thing is now with this, you have to understand fit, right? Because you're not going to go somewhere and profit off your name, image, and likeness, or get this revenue share money if you're not able to showcase your talents, right? It's better to go to the levels you can play at and develop at your own time. So now maybe you can reap those benefits later on. And now the other thing that you have to pay mind to is the NCAA rules, which may be passed here at the end of October, is you're going to have 5 years of eligibility. So you're going to have 5 years to play in 5 years. So the NCAA will get rid of, waivers. Before, it used to be you have 5 years and you can play 4 years of basketball within 5 years. So if you get hurt, you still get a year back.
Yeah.
Now, if you get hurt, well, year one, you're hurt. Well, you still have 4 more years to play. So you don't have to worry about that. But it also differentiates some strategy too. At the lower levels, schools would like to redshirt guys that weren't ready. They can probably get an older player, put them in their system and redshirt them. But now that's kind of being taken away if they have 5 years of eligibility.
Interesting. Now that it is a lot has changed over the years. And with this, with our show, Real Life Finance, so we have a role at the bank where we go out and teach money management, right? So you mentioned we hear about the ones that make the 20 million or and I'm not sure what the average NIL deal is, but are there financial education support systems for athletes that go through this? Or what do you see as some of the gaps and the good things that you've seen that schools are doing?
Yeah, that's I think some schools, right, with some visionary thought, they have courses on revenue sharing. They have courses on branding. They have courses on marketing. That helps. Some have basically student assisted groups where, a senior and upperclassmen will come talk about, tax law. Certain schools, I know Creighton has one, Seton Hall has one, have certain courses in their curriculum, which I think is forward thinking. But to actually have an all-encompassing platform that's talking about, trust and SEP plans and 401ks and, retirement. I mean, there's a lot to digest, and it's not easy. I think, as you've found, right, it's not easy to learn all this information, to go to class, to go to practice, to eat right, to sleep right. And I would say the biggest thing, right, the one investment that I think all, student athletes that are getting paid, you got to get a great mattress, right? You need to make sure you're sleeping well at night. And then you also have to have a great kind of system or network built up around you, because you want to ask questions. In the beginning of it, you have to know you don't know the answers. That's the first step.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think there's only maybe a handful, if that many, schools that require a certain amount of financial education, for those NIL students. And for those that don't know that listen to us, we do this, right? I go speak on campuses a lot, talking about retirement and investments and credit and budgeting, all that. So if you're a university that needs some help with your students, you let us know, right?
Hey, it's a great plug. And there's never enough education out there, right? I mean, and there's so many different ways to be able to save and budget, and those are just like strategies like time management when you get to college.
Absolutely. So I know with athletics, emotions come and involve when money becomes a topic. So personal circumstances, like family needs or financial background, how does that impact athletes, how they manage NIL earnings and maybe cost of attendance funds, things like that? Because I know emotions get involved with some of this stuff.
Yeah, there's a couple different ways that these young men and women also get money, right? So you do have that cost of attendance. That's the NCAA.
And maybe we explain that for our listeners too.
So cost of attendance, the NCAA said, hey, basically a normal student goes to college or university. They go out to dinner on the weekends. They go to the movies. They go out on a date. They need a sport coat for a presentation. They need some school supplies. So they came up with some sort of formula that says, hey, they go home on the weekends too, right? Or they fly home on holidays. So they put together this formula and they came up with a rough number. And so say it's $1,200 this semester, right? So $2,400 for the year. So that's the cost of attendance number. On top of that cost of attendance number, right, a couple of years ago, there was the Alston case that came out that basically said you can reward student athletes for academic achievement. That number is $5,980. So you put that together with Alston money, cost of attendance, and now you have that rev share if that school has opted in. If the school has not opted in, now the school cannot pay. They usually rely on outside sources, which are called collectives. Some Power 4 schools still have collectives because once that rev share number is hit, that 20.5 million is used, well, now they need to find more ways to pay their student athletes. But so that's kind of the nuts and bolts of that money. And then you kind of go from there.
Okay. So it's kind of like a personal budget. Once you've ran out of your cash flow coming in, you've got to find other ways to make things happen, right? So it's just from a different scale from this perspective.
Correct. In that scale, based on the level, right? Based on the commitment from the athletic department, the athletic director, it varies.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you, some key financial considerations for athletes managing this NIL income. Let's talk like taxes, budgeting, supporting family, and the versus long-term opportunities. A lot of times people will focus on what's immediate gratification, important to them. So when you're working with student athletes, a lot of them, I imagine as a young kid, you get a handful of money and it's easy to go blow it on something that we don't need. How are some of those discussions taking place, or some advice that maybe you can give to those student athletes?
Yeah, it's as we talked about that word discipline, right?
Yeah.
It comes down to understanding, hey, we need to know you're getting X amount of dollars. Well, let's take the taxes out first so you understand how much you really have, because we don't want to think we have $1 million and spend $1 million and now we actually owe money at the end, right?
Yeah.
It's not time to maybe buy an S-Class Mercedes, right? You may want to buy a Ford Explorer because, you're going to have to be putting some mileage on it, right? You want to show also the people in the university how thankful you are and that this is still a job, right?
Yes.
Now, as much as we want to say, like, these student athletes are employees. Now, that's a whole nother topic, talking about labor unions and if they're going to be considered employees or not. But, if we're educating our young people the right way, right, it's not about the frivolous things and the things that are unnecessary. It's about the things that actually need to help get you to where you want to go, right? So it's about maybe when you sign your NIL contract or your contract with the rev share, it's about maybe flights for mom and dad to come to and from home to watch you play because they're your support system. Or you have a single mom and you have siblings. Well, maybe you can put some of that money in a 529 plan for your younger siblings, so there's already a nest egg for them to get to college. To now you're bettering your family's life, right? So I think that education is key, but hey, you don't know. Maybe mom or dad has incurred some debt. Maybe mom was laid off and she's behind in rent or behind in the mortgage. Every family's different. Yeah. Everyone has different hurdles. Everyone's had different blessings. But at the end of the day, I think it's about understanding that and being able to relate those messages.
Yeah. There was a viral, I think it was on TikTok maybe, where a student athlete had taken his NIL funds and paid for his sister's college, which I thought was pretty tremendous. And I think that's great advice. I've heard of NFL players that live off of, like, there's one gentleman off $70,000 a year so he can live by the bare basis because he's not going to play forever, right? And imagine building up a lifestyle where you're used to making a lot of money and maybe only working in the pros for, 5, 7, 8 years, and then figure out how to make that money last for the rest of your life.
No, some of these student athletes can, create generational wealth. And, this may be a short window to do this. So they need somebody to help them take advantage of that. I mean, you look at one of Indiana's players, Lamar Wilkinson, he donated back from his NIL money he got from IU back to the university that helped him get his start. I mean, that's pretty special.
That is pretty special.
It seems like a great young man.
Yes. So real life stories. Let's think about what you've dealt with, Coach. And can you share any stories of an athlete who may have received substantial NIL funds, and did they handle things responsibly, or how are they managing those funds today? Or even the flip side, if you've seen it go the other way.
Yes, there's been stories and people I've known where, they dealt with adversity at a young age.
Mm-hmm.
Mom was out of work and they were kind of moving and living out of the backseat of their car. And so, they needed that money up front and were able to take it and then, move again and get some more money and have a chance to play professionally, right? Because the other thing is the NBA, to make that's hard. Yeah. And the percentage of guys in college that make the NBA is a very, very small percentage. But then being able to have that discipline and that background, you're still going to be able to make a good life. Now, you're not getting $2 million a year in your first year overseas,
right?
But you have to start your career, right? And you have to build back up. And sometimes it's in Italy, sometimes it's in Greece. Now, obviously, you have to be able to enjoy another culture, another way of life, but that's also something I think comes with age and appreciation. But, I think the one investment too, I had a young man that was coming from a Big Ten school, came to play for me. He only wanted to play for 1 year. This was back before huge NIL, but was able to get, a little bit of money from cost of attendance. And he got hurt. And I said, listen, we're not going to have you come back and try to ingrain you in our team in January. We've been playing since November. The rotations kind of get set. It'll hurt you. It'll hurt your numbers. What I'm going to do is we're going to pay for your final year of school. You'll still be on scholarship. You're going to get your master's degree. Then we're going to get you to Australia where you can train and rehab. And now he's playing professionally in Germany on his third year.
No.
And so, I think it comes back to that trust piece, that advising piece, understanding that the only joy in my reward is that joy of seeing these young men be successful.
That's awesome. So our very first guest on the show, Coach, was Luke Zeller, who him and his brothers played professionally. He told the story about traveling overseas, and I just try to picture Luke as like 6'7", riding this little bicycle, and with his lunch in the front. He was telling all this, but talked about some of that adversity that they face when traveling overseas, but doing everything they can to dedicate, like you said, as their job of showcasing why they deserve to be there. But interesting. So yeah, it's a lot of the same things I hear. It's very interesting to talk about. So smart strategies that you see that I guess athletes can use most to, off the modest earnings. So let's say somebody isn't that $2 million, $20 million deal. And I don't even know what the average NIL deal is, but how do they utilize, in your suggestion, of best utilizing those funds to kind of help them in the day-to-day things that they do?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have your typical savings account. I'm a big proponent of, investing in the stock market, right? It also, gives them some sort of level of research to look into Apple account and where was Apple stock, a couple of years ago, right? Yeah. Look into different things politically and socially that's going on in the world with maybe you can make an investment into something that you believe in. Is it, hey, you're a big proponent and you love Nike or your school's Adidas or whatever it may be. Maybe you can invest in that stock where now you have a little bit of skin in the game, right? Yeah. You never know if that leads to a true NIL deal if you get good enough, right? Hey, right. I have stock in Nike. What about, maybe get an endorsement deal.
Yeah.
I mean,
and I think, and having the importance of having a team with you, right? So you've got your individual helping, your career. You've got a financial advisor for, so you can do what you love and playing your athletics and let the banker, the advisor help you grow that wealth. Because I'm sure that you've seen there's some bad actors that try to take advantage of some of these athletes. Is there any stories that you want to share kind of about maybe what student athletes might want to look out for so they don't fall to that bad actor?
Yeah, I mean, you have to make sure you're reading your contracts, right? Me, as a former head coach, I got a contract extension. I needed to read the back end of that contract.
Yeah.
So learning from that lesson, there's no way you need to be given 20% of your NIL deals for the longevity of your career to somebody that just came in and sees a chance to make quick money, right? So you want to go with the reputable agents. You want to go with the guys that have done it before, that also see the vision for you past college, right? You want to go with the agents that have NBA players, that are NBA player certified.
Yeah.
Now, you also want to make sure that they have that same vision for you that you do, right? You want that alignment. So it's the same thing when dealing with a bank, right? You want that alignment in terms of strategy.
Yeah.
Are they about the community, right? Do their morals and values match up with you as an individual, you as a family? So I think those are the biggest things. And the contracts are huge. The alignment is huge. And then obviously you want it to be a real relationship, right? You want it to be not just a transactional relationship. And as we know, the world is getting more and more transactional.
It is. But I think that piece is huge. 20% of a big deal is a lot of money. And I think maybe some athletes look at that bottom number and say, well, this is a lot, I'm good. But to think what they could do with investing that 20% or working with an agent that's in it for them. And I think cultural alignment is so huge when they get paired together.
No, couldn't agree more.
Not all athletes are going to go pro, right? And I think Luke even told us at one time, you could put every NBA player that's made it from all time in his high school where he played at. So the percentage of people going pro is not as great as, people would like it to be. So for those athletes that are not going to go pro or may not go pro, how do you think the discipline that they apply to sports that they've built, over the years, they can apply into strong financial habits and long-term planning based on, what they learned through their lifetime?
Yeah. I mean, just we keep coming back to that word discipline, right? Being able to have enough discipline to invest X% per month.
Yeah.
Right. Hey, we know this is the end of your 5th year in college. Now what are we doing? Do we want to kind of, recalibrate your risk assessment in the market, right? Do we want to, make some other plays? Do we want to take some losses for tax purposes? But I think that discipline, understanding a budget, understanding the commitment to be able to read and stay aware of politics and current events, to be able to, watch the markets a little bit, to know some different things are going on. And I do think you have to be able to set aside stuff for more or less recreation and entertainment, right? Especially when you graduate, is there going to be some sort of gift that maybe you can send to mom or dad or somebody that's helped you, your financial advisor, right? Anytime you can kind of pay it forward and thank somebody. And, I think you have to.
I think that's great. And I'm glad you mentioned earlier that I wanted to bring up is how the income is taxable. And I think a lot of people forget that. It's like, you hear the stories of somebody won the big lottery and then like, oh, I forgot about taxes. So how important is that for kids to realize that, you got to pay Uncle Sam right at the beginning and, and figure out what your needs are versus your wants? Because, it is basic needs and wants a lot of times, just like everyday living. And the cost of living is going up so much. And I think that discipline is so important today more than I've seen it ever be.
Yeah, to be able to, one, have somebody you can trust to kind of give you, even if it's a ballpark number, right? It doesn't need to be by the exact penny, but hey, this is the real number you have. So don't look at this total number, right? Let's take about 40% off the top, and now this is the number you have. And now these are your expenses you have here, right? You got your car expense. Well, right now your food's being taken care of because you have training table after practice. You're on the road, right, for games and travel. So you have pregame meal. All right, you'd like to go out on the weekend. So being able to have that budget, being able to have somebody that can help you with that, even if it's a teammate, right? Being able to have guys on the same team understanding like, hey, man, like we can't be going to Ruth Chris every night and having 500-600 and thinking we've made it, right?
Yes.
You can't, you've never made it. You always have to keep kind of just keep investing, keep saving.
Yeah.
And then also you also have to continually go back and if you need to reframe, where the money's going and say, hey, well, right now I spent a little much here, but I didn't spend enough here, right? Maybe you live off campus. Maybe you're fortunate enough to, some of these guys in college making good money, they've invested in properties already.
Yes.
I love that, because now once they're done, they're still playing. They're playing overseas. They didn't make the NBA. Well, now they're coming back to the university that they hopefully graduated from or about to graduate from. But now they can be living there. They can still be giving back to their program and the new current players.
Yep.
And now you're helping build another person that can be a good voice or representative of what good financial practice is.
That's a great point. And a lot of times we do hear about the real estate and getting into using that education. I think that's so important because you never know when an injury could take place either, right? And having that backup plan of being able to, if athletics won't take you forever, having that education to fall back on is so key.
Yeah. I went to play overseas in Bologna, Italy. I was there for a day and a half, and since I had an Italian passport, I needed to establish residency in that town with the town government. I missed the deadline by 12 hours. I went home, I blew out my knee, and then I rehabbed. I had to go back to a lower level in Italy. That's where I found out where my pizza was made. And and then, but you start to think more.
Yeah.
And then, when I had all that time in Italy and I was in A2, you're only playing one game a week. In the Euro League and A1, the top league, you're playing sometimes 2 games a week, which now it's a little more taxing, but you have a good amount of free time. And that's kind of where I found out I wanted to coach, but that's also where I kind of dove more into my portfolio of what I had invested in. Yeah. And so, God has a plan and, there's always different steps to take, but you always kind of just, keep going forward and keep learning.
So one question I do have, I know it's name, image, and likeness for NIL and what it stands for. Can we break down, though, before we go into our lightning round questions that we're going to do in a little bit, of really what goes into that name, image, and likeness? Because I heard you mention a number that's associated with people. And I see a lot of these athletes be big on whether it's Instagram or TikTok. And I know that number of followers helps increase their brand. And is there anything else that kind of goes into that our listeners might be curious if they've heard of it, but they're like, what makes up this name, image, and likeness?
Originally you had to be good.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
In order to get money, you had to be good. Before name, image, and likeness, you never really knew the real number that these guys were getting paid, but there were still guys getting paid, but they were the elite, right? The best of the best. But what really goes into that is just somebody thinks you're good and you're going to help their team win.
Yeah.
And they're going to pay you for it, whether you're a good shooter, a good rebounder, a good assist man. But it's more just pay for play.
Yeah.
I think NIL is just kind of the secret word to say, hey, you're good. We want to pay you.
Yeah.
Now you're really an employee. We're going to be able to get you money from the school because we're sharing revenue that the school is bringing in. And at the end of the day, like I said, you got to keep the main
Yeah.
thing the main thing. You got to be good at your craft. You have to be disciplined, and you have to keep working.
I think there's even some websites if they want to see their favorite, college athletes. It's all out there where you can see what people are making, and it's pretty impressive. It really is. So, Coach, what we like to do when we wrap up is do some lightning round questions to get to know you. Number one, what's the most valuable lesson that you've learned in your career or life so far?
Oh, don't be so trusting.
Yeah?
I take people to be as genuine and upfront as I am. And sometimes I think that's a detriment. I think sometimes you have to be able to, kind of hold your cards a little closer to your vest.
Yeah, that's good. That is good. Number two, if you could instantly master any skill, what would it be and why?
Automatically being able to look at somebody and pick out what their intention is, right? So I want to be able to read minds.
That would
I don't
be
know.
awesome.
Yeah, I don't know if my wife would like it,
I know, right?
but it's I just think, now as we talk about transparency and we talk about being able to help people, you find that there's probably more bad actors and
Yeah.
people that have ulterior motives. So being able to just kind of, look at somebody and maybe I see a word on their forehead, it just comes up, and that's my superpower.
I love it. I love it. What was that movie? Was it What Women Want, where Mel Gibson could read people's minds? I was
Yeah,
like, that would be nice, I think, to an extent. So, all right, number three, what is your go-to activity or hobby that you like to do when you unwind?
Man, so when I can find a great yoga studio, I love hot yoga.
Really?
My wife and I did it in DC before kids, and it was, just very relaxing.
Yeah.
It helps you decompress. If I can't get a yoga studio, I'm going for a 3-mile run in the woods.
Nice.
Love being outdoors. But one I usually kind of not settle for, but really enjoy. I have 3 little kids, so if I can get them all in a pool together with me
Yeah.
and just swim, I know they're not getting in trouble outside the pool, and I know I'm able to kind of get some sun and get some activity.
Absolutely. How old are your children?
2, 5, and 8.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So
Fun ages.
little girl Reese is 8. She was our first. She runs the family.
Yep.
My 5-year-old Mateo, he's more going to be like the electrician, builder of things. And then my 2-year-old Caden, and he's already thrown a football, basketball, hitting the baseball.
So he's your sportsman.
Probably.
Fantastic. Well, he'll have a good leader when it comes to managing that. So our last question is, who's been the most influential person in your life and why?
So I got, obviously, my family,
Yeah.
my mother, my father, my sister, and then my wife.
Yeah.
So, I would say that's kind of a softball, but I
Yeah.
kind of copped out with naming 4 people.
That's
but,
okay.
I wouldn't be here without any of that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, anything before we wrap up, Coach, that you would like to leave as final words to maybe athletes that are on that pathway to become, student athletes and run through the NIL programs and hopefully on to college athletics and maybe pro. Any advice that you want to leave with them before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, certain circumstances require that money's the deciding factor, but when it doesn't have to be the deciding factor and you can go to the best place for your development,
Yeah.
and it's about the education, it's about the program, it's about the network after college. I'm a real big proponent. If you can go play in the Ivy League,
Yeah.
and you can afford it, or you're able to get enough money to go to the Ivy League, the Patriot League, high level educations. Obviously there's other schools not in those conferences that are a high level academic playing field. You want to make sure you're growing your mind,
Yeah.
right? Obviously you have a chance to now grow your bank account,
Yeah.
but if you're not growing your mind at the same time and you're not growing your skill set, it's all going to be for naught, because
Yeah.
you're not going to know what to do with your money, or you're not going to know what to do with your game.
Yeah.
So just being able to find that right circle of people to trust and, really making the best decision for your overall development when you can.
Absolutely. Yeah, and for all those athletes that are looking for a good partner, right, come see us at any of our branches. We'll get an advisor talking with you. But Coach Maciariello, thank you so much for taking time to meet with us today. This is a growing topic that probably will continue to evolve as time goes on. But I appreciate you being so gracious to join us and help our followers and viewers and listeners learn a little bit more about NIL. And I appreciate you sharing your personal story as well.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you.